Welcome everybody to Are We Witches with me, Sarah Drummond.
And me, Lisa Marmore.
Today we are thrilled to welcome Icy Sedgwick to the podcast. Icy is a prolific author, most recently of the book Fate or Fortune, which explores divination throughout history, blending folklore, cultural context, and practical application. She hosts the wonderful podcast Fabulous Folklore of Icy, available wherever you get your podcasts, and her website is a treasure trove of information, including a weekly blog with 10 years of content to dive into.
We talk folklore, ghost hunting, divination, love magic, the archetypes of witches, and the conversation was an incredible introduction to Icy's work. We were left wanting so much more, and we're sure you'll feel the same way. You'll hear about where you can find her near the end of the podcast, and of course, we've provided links in the show notes. We started our conversation as usual by seeing where magic found us in our daily lives with house tricks. So please enjoy our conversation with the wonderful Icy Sedgwick. On with the show. House tricks.
So yes, welcome so much, Icy. We're so happy to have you here on House Tricks with us, one of our very favourite segments, just all about where we have seen magic in the wild recently in our everyday lives. And my tricks are very simple this week as well, but it did involve just a very lovely little walk along Regent's Canal in London last week. And it was a beautiful sunny day, and there was just dappled sunlight coming through the trees, and just very early on, it felt like it had a little touch of enchantment. It just felt like a very magical walk. I'd not seen this friend for a few months, so we're catching up on a few different things. And one of the things she did say was she was feeling very stuck at the moment. She's kind of between countries even. She's not sure what's going to happen with her visa. She doesn't know how to move forward on a few different things. She wants to, but there's medical issues in there as well. And so she's just feeling in this place like she's been trying to, how she put it, she's been trying to climb this mountain for so long, trying to get to this peak, of her existence. And she's just hit these like bramble bushes and thorns and everything in the way, and it's just trying to like cut her way through, but it's cutting her back, and she just can't seem to get through this thicket. And what was so gorgeous about this was just as she was explaining this, we came across a whole row of wild brambles growing, and she immediately went, "Oh yay, brambles," and got really excited and started eating all of the wild fruit. And they continued periodically throughout our walk. And every time she saw them, she got really excited, and she got these gorgeous like purple hands stained from the fruit. And I was like, "You're complaining about being stuck in the brambles, but like, it's not all bad, like not that she's complaining unrealistically, like things are, a bit bad sometimes. But also how happy she was that the brambles were there. It was just a really lovely coming together of how stuck she was feeling, but also how much she is such a good person at enjoying the journey, enjoying even that stuckness and eating all of the brambles along the way. So yeah, it was just a very magical little walk. And at the very end, we stumbled across an outdoor cinema space near King's Cross. And we'd been talking about love, as we're often wont to do. What is love? Will we find love? All of these things. And we stumble across this free outdoor cinema just at the very end of a Tom Hanks movie where, it's like wildly romantic. There's the big kiss, big finale. And we were like, yes, that's it. That's our sign. It's happening. So those are my tricks. It was just a lovely little walk in London last week.
That is lovely. And there is fruit to be found in the brambles, isn't there? There's always something like, even in stuckness, there's something to be found, something to be learned.
Exactly. And she is taking everything she can from what is a rather bad situation.
Yeah, good on her.
Literally.
It's a lot of the time hands. I just sit down and cry about it.
Which is also very helpful. Yeah. I would defend a good cry.
Yeah, well, people say, well, what's the point in complaining? And I'm like, what makes Makes
Well,
me feel better temporarily, at least.
emotional regulation,
Mm,
processing what's happening, being able to
exactly.
move forwards. Absolutely. I'll defend a complaint, a cry, all time. So, Lisa,
Mhm.
how are your tricks doing?
Pretty good. I went pretty much trickless for a long time, just
Mm-hmm.
standing there waiting for signs. Looking, no enchantment anywhere. But, last episode, Sarah, we did our tarot van reading, and the Nine of Pentacles card came out,
Yes.
and we both loved that card. So lush and so full of, wine and, you know, why can't I find words today? Sorry, I've had a very long day. But, there was so much hope for the fruition of hard work. And, then I have what I need and everything is here. And I've been pulling a card for myself just every now and then throughout the week, kind of thinking, I feel like on the precipice of something. I'm feeling very like something's about to happen. And I have pulled the Nine of Pentacles card 4 times in the last week.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I don't know. I mean, you know how I'm very skeptical about everything and I can't let myself just enjoy it. But really, I said, oh, this is being quite insistent here. And so I think that the Nine of Pentacles is going to be going on the fridge. I like to put on the fridge the ones that I'm feeling really good about at the moment. So Nine of Pentacles is it. I'm feeling like the fruition of my hard work is on the way, and I'm just going to have to stick to it. And then I'll be standing in my vineyard with a bird of prey perched atop my left finger. And then, because that wasn't quite enough of a sign, the universe said, Girl, I got you. Um, I had to go fill up my car with petrol the other day, and petrol here is so insanely expensive at the moment. So I've left it till I'm almost on empty. And I pulled into the petrol station and I kind of balked at the price. But there I was, and I filled up my car with petrol. And I went in to pay. And the guy said, Would you like anything else from the shop? And I said, No. And the total was like $113 and something. Yes, I see that look of surprise is incredibly appropriate. Uh, but he applied a discount that is only supposed to be given. I didn't even notice the sign outside, but there was, as I walked out, I saw the sign outside that said 4 cents a litre discount if you spend $10 or more in store, which I had not done. But this lovely young gentleman applied the discount anyway, which took my total.
Wow.
Right now, I see 11s follow me everywhere, everywhere, my whole life. And when I tell you that at the end of a long day, feeling really bad about having to spend so much money on petrol, this really helped me out. So I felt very looked out for by the universe this week, and I will take it. So those are
Gorgeous.
my tricks. Now, Icy, how's tricks for you?
I think mine's probably quite, I don't want to say basic because that word has a lot of connotations, but I went on a walk in Hune Park near Alnwick um last week. I think when that was. Well, what is time? And the walk was a lot longer than I was anticipating. And when you see it written on paper, oh, it's 2 miles and this one's 4 miles, and you go, well, that's not that far. And then you start and you're like, oh, yeah, no, it is, because a lot of it's uphill, and I was not anticipating that. And I wanted to go and have a look at the ruins of Hune Priory, which is in this sort of park owned by the Northumberland estate. It was in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and Robin of Sherwood. Apparently, I
Oh,
didn't realise
wow.
that until after I'd been, but it's very picturesque. more or less had the place to myself, which is nice. But I was absolutely shattered by the time I got there because like I've got various problems with fatigue anyway, and there was literally nowhere to sit. So I'm kind of like just like I'm just gonna keep pushing on. I've got to get there. I've started, so I'll finish. I can't just stop and sit down and rest all my aching joints because that's not an option. I'll just keep going. And there's sheep everywhere, and it all just feels a bit odd. I just want to get the priory. And you had to walk up a hill like that to get to it. And I got halfway up and I was like, I'm not even going to look at where I'm going. I'm just going to like straight ahead and pretend that yeah, I'm nearly at the top. And finally got there, opened the door, went in, and first thing I saw was a yew tree, and I absolutely adore yew trees. And it was this weird feeling of like, oh, and it was like you know when you see your friend that you haven't seen in a really long time.
Yeah.
So I just kind of hung out with the yew tree for a while, and then went around taking pictures. But it was like I'm so glad that the first thing I saw when I walked in the door was like my favorite tree. And I don't think it was a sign or anything like that. I mean, you get yew trees in churches a lot anyway. It's just, it was one of those moments where everything kind of coalesces and then you're like, oh, actually, I do feel a bit better now, thanks. I mean, I'm still knackered and everything hurts and I've sort of dissociated a bit because I'm in that much pain. But yeah, yew tree, that's always good. So I think that would probably be mine. It was very, very good timing to come across my favorite tree on that particular occasion.
You
Yeah.
know, that sounds wonderful. I have an affinity for nature and certain trees and things as well. And so it is like a little hug for you after you've traversed that uphill
Hmm.
road. And I don't think I've ever seen a yew tree.
Oh,
I don't know if you've got them in your neck of the woods.
I don't think we do.
yeah.
I need to look into our botanical gardens and see if there's a
Hmm.
random yew around because I've heard about them so much,
Hmm.
particularly to do with old churches and that they're, got that little kind of spooky woo kind of feeling around them. And so I think I'd love to track down a yew tree. And if not in this hemisphere, then when I come to visit,
In the northern. But no foraging around yew trees. I'm right when I say that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they are
no
poisonous.
foraging. They
Yeah.
are poisonous, yeah. So if you see,
oh,
yeah, public service announcement, if you see mushrooms around a yew tree, they're not for picking.
really?
Yeah.
Will they inoculate the mushrooms with some kind of
I'm not
poisonous?
sure exactly how it works, but they are poisonous and the mushrooms
Wow.
can absorb some of that, so it's not to be ingested.
Okay, well, that's a
Yeah.
really good warning for me, a famous
Yeah,
forager.
I know, because you'd be like, oh, yew tree, oh, mushrooms,
Num
what a
num
good
num, dead.
day. Though I think your tricks were both quite similar in the end. I feel like the 11, 11, 11 that follows you everywhere, Lisa, and like the
Mm.
meeting of like a favorite tree at the end of like a difficult journey or a difficult day. It's like both of those things are just the signs that whether it's meant to be from the universe or not, but signs that you can take as like a comfort and something for you to
Yes.
enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah.
agreed.
Always
Good.
looking for those synchronicities.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes I feel like I'm placing a lot on those things, especially with the 11s. I mean, 11
But
happens,
they
it's a
really
number,
do
but
follow
they
you
really, it isn't insane.
everywhere. I,
My,
for one, am an 11 and I follow you everywhere. So, like
this
in
is
numerology,
true.
my number is an 11.
And you do. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things where I told my parents at one point about it, and they were like, oh, yeah, whatever. But now that they have witnessed so many
Mm-hmm.
11s popping up everywhere around me, now they think it's hilarious. And they think it's also the universe speaking to me. So there
Yeah.
you go.
Still there.
Who's that witch? Icy, we are just so pleased to have you here. You are a prolific author, podcaster, blogger.
Mm-hmm.
You do it all, and we don't know how. Because we barely managed to make this podcast every
And just before you
fortnight.
got on, we were just talking about how we had scraped through another week. So,
so,
yeah.
so how did it all begin for you? Like, what's the origin of your love of folklore and folk stories?
I think I'd always been interested in fairy tales, as I think a lot of children usually are, and I distinctly remember somewhere in the house. It could be anywhere at this point. I mean, we could have the one ring in here and nobody would know. And it was a collection, like a hardback book about year thick of Hans Christian Andersen
Yes.
tales that were all illustrated. And I remember always thinking the Snow Queen was a really interesting one. But then it was when I got to about 10 or 11, we'd gone to one of the castles, of which there are many where I am, and they had like a little pamphlet, just A5, sort of, I think it's about 40 odd pages. And I mean, the copyright date on it is 1989, but I think I got it a bit after that. And it was more Ghost and Legends of Northumbria. And so I got the sequel first. And then the next time I went to a stately home, I was like, oh, there's the first one. So I got that one. And then we just started collecting these local folklore books everywhere that I went. So even when I go to, I went to Venice and I managed to find a collection of Venetian ghost stories in English in one of the books. And I must have looked like such a weird person because I started following them because they were laid out like ghost walks. And there's this particular bit where there's like a carving on the outside of a building. Well, of course, I had to go and have a look for it. So I'm like all over the side of this wall in this really public square, and people are looking at me, and I'm like, you don't see this in the Da Vinci Code. People just let like Tom Hanks do what he wants. Nobody gives him funny looks. And eventually, I found it, and I was pointing it out to people, and I was like, look, I'm not weird. But yes, I think it was just something about the stories were really interesting, but also hearing stories about places that I knew. So obviously we can, oh, I know where that is. I can go there. I can visit there. And then actually, when I was in those places, like I mean, you can't move for ghost books in York. You know, it's just one of those kind of classic locations, and and it just kind of always made being somewhere a bit more interesting because I'd either read some of the ghost stories or I'd read some of the folk tales or whatever. So yeah, so it all goes back about 30 years really, which it makes me feel old.
Well, are you particularly attached to any of the pieces of the folklore you've come across in those 30 years? Like, what is your favorite of the stories currently?
I mean, I love all of them, and it's difficult to necessarily pick a favorite. I always love stories with dragons in because I'm a sort of quite stereotypical dragon person. I love dragons. And I always just think that they've got a lot of bad PR in the West. And we've got a story of a dragon, but it's called a worm because our stories in the Northeast they tend to be worms rather than dragons, and they just mean like a long thin serpent, and it's actually from an old English word, and it's from Bamborough, which is the castle overlooking Lindisfarne, sort of the island that gets cut off. So if anyone's seen 28 Years Later, that's the island I mean. And there's this particular story. We don't know who the king in the story is, but his wife dies. He's got two children who are like adults by this point. So you've got the beautiful Princess Margaret and her brother, Child Wind. And when their mother dies, he decides to take another wife and ends up with the stereotypical wicked queen, who's actually also a witch and or a sorceress actually is the way she's described in the legend. And she's really jealous of Margaret's beauty and popularity with the people, so we're getting into Snow White territory here as well. And Child Wind goes off adventuring. We're not quite sure where, but it must be somewhere over the North Sea. And then while he's away, the Queen curses Margaret and she takes the form of this giant sort of serpent type snake and takes up residence in a hollow nearby. And eventually, the local villagers have to placate this massive dragon with like I think it's the milk of seven cows every day just to stop her eating livestock and so on. And eventually, Child Wind hears about this giant dragon that's taken up residence next to his castle, and obviously everyone has sort of started to realize it might be Margaret because she vanished at the same time that the dragon appeared.
We've
So I
never
think
seen
they've
them in the
obviously
room at the same time.
so they finally put two and two together on that one. But Child Wind also isn't daft, and he comes back in a ship made of rowan wood, and obviously rowan famously used to ward off various enchantments. So the Queen tries to sink his ship several times with storms, but he still manages to arrive. And when he gets back to the Hollow, obviously he just sees this giant dragon, and he sort of draws his sword. But thankfully, he hears a voice from somewhere sort of saying like, "Don't kill the dragon. You need to kiss the dragon." So he gives it sort of three kisses, sort of like on its cheek, I'm assuming. And lo and behold, the dragon then sheds its skin and Margaret steps out. So he takes his sister back up to the castle. And obviously they confront the queen. She's not very happy that she's basically been found out. And then I think she tries to curse them again, but it rebounds on her because again, Child Wind's like covered in roan at this point.
Mm.
And she turns into an evil toad and then takes up residence at the bottom of the castle well. So I quite like that story because the hero is Margaret's brother rather than just some random passing prince. Like he's got a little bit more skin in the game in this one. And you can actually see the hollow, I think, where the dragon was supposed to take up residence. But Banbury's like open to the public. You can go and visit it. And it's got a happy ending as well for a dragon story, and they don't always end like that. So I've always loved that one.
Is Bambara Bambra?
It's Bamburgh, so
Of
typical English
course.
pronunciation, not matching the spelling. Obviously the burr coming from like a fortified hill, I guess.
Okay, it's just because I grew up on Bambara Road and I was like, surely it's not the same. And if it is, what a coinkydink. But like that's yeah, that there are a lot of those stories where there's the witch or sorceress who's jealous of a young woman's beauty. Like, do you see that a lot? Is that like in folklore? I mean, you hear it in fairy tales. Like, are fairy tales and folklore the same thing?
Oh, that's a massive question.
Sorry, I just thought of it.
I think some people tend to see the difference as being like fairy tales or stories that obviously adults would have shared that became for children
Yeah.
way later. Like that was like a 19th century thing with the Grimms, really. They massively sanitized them, whereas before that, adults used to make them up and tell them to each other. So it was very much that kind of like a story type, like there's a formula for them. Whereas folklore can be very different because it can obviously just be how to pass on information about things, usually that are dangerous, quite frankly. And then you've got folk tales, which often they kind of sometimes dovetail with legends a little bit, so it can be a bit difficult to kind of separate which one's which. But I think fairy tales definitely have an air of invention about them, which is why someone like Hans Christian Andersen could then just write a bunch of fairy tales, and they're considered his tales.
Mm.
Because you can sort of find an author for them sometimes, not always. Fairy tales are kind of a little bit beyond my remix. I tend to
Yeah,
stick more with folklore because it's like it's the stories of ordinary people, if that makes sense.
yeah. Um, so you told us about that witch. So what are the different, are they like a broad range of witch archetypes in folklore? Like,
You get maybe four, I think. There's probably more, but the ones I could think of most often is obviously you've got like your neighbour who's just a bit odd. And sometimes the neighbours will know she's a witch, but because they know her, they sort of overlook the oddness in some ways. So there's a really lovely one from the borders where the local witch ends up weaving a I can't even think what the word is for it, but it's kind of like it's not a blanket, but it's like it's something that this shepherd can wear basically. So it's kind of like an overgarment type thing, and he ends up giving it as an offering to the fairies. Um, so, but then they end up sort of helping her and everything in her time of need and everything. So she kind of helps them. So you sometimes get like the just unusual neighbor where witches use so that you know that this person does magic, but they're not necessarily malicious. You get the wise woman archetype probably most often where that person just knows how to solve a problem. So somebody's cows won't give any milk, and the wise woman will go, "You need to do this," and then give them the solution, and people just go, "Cool," and go and do it. And they're seen as like the one, and obviously that can be a wise man as well. Goes either way, but they're very much just a person who knows what's going on. And I always kind of think, oh, we need more of them. Um,
yeah.
then you've got the cunning folk who do the same sort of thing as the wise woman or wise man, but they charge for their services. Um, and you get them a lot in stories of, and these are like historical stories of actual people, of the service magicians. where people would go to them because they'd be like, "Oh, I've lost something," and this person would do a charm or a divination to find out who the thief was. Particular as one example, and people might go to them for help winning court cases, things like that, finding partners, all sorts of things gets covered by cunning folk, and it's kind of people just accept that these people have abilities. They're not seen as witches because it's not diabolical what they're
Mm.
doing. They just have
Mm.
abilities in the same way that like somebody might hire a copywriter or a photographer now because they've got skills. In that era, people would hire these cunning folk. And
Right.
then you've got the like the archetypal witch of this is a person who's evil, does malicious work, has a familiar of some description, and has made a pact with the devil. And that's very much the Christian one that sort of appears throughout a lot of the folklore. And that's the one that people are trying to ward off with things like Rowan and things like that. And I think what's really funny is when you look at the kind of witchcraft that people practice now, it's very much more in the cunning folk sort of
Yeah.
end of the spectrum.
Mm.
And so it's quite funny how there's loads of that stuff. People find information in books like Reginald Scott wrote A Discovery of Witchcraft, and he relates, you know, he does this to debunk witchcraft and to say it's nonsense. But in order to do so, he then writes down a lot of these people's practices. It's like, thanks, Reginald. That was really helpful. We now know what people are actually doing. But it means that when you look at a lot of the things that he puts down, you kind of go, well, actually, would that be workable? And so yeah, they do vary, but I think the mo most people what they do was probably closer to cunningcraft rather than the Christian version of witchcraft.
Yeah.
Keeping note of them to see which category we might fall into later, Lisa.
Yeah, exactly.
Not charging anybody and not wise and not made a pact with the devil, as far as I'm aware. So far it's looking like friendly neighborhood witch, but we'll see.
The
We'll
weird
see.
neighbor.
Yeah, the weird neighbor.
Yeah.
That that's a bit too apt.
Yes. Ready for filth. Okay.
So when you retell these older stories, do you see that like either do you need to adjust the lens from a modern perspective to engage a modern audience, or do you try and stay as close to like a source of the old folklore as you can, especially thinking with the way that witchcraft has become so very popular again in recent years, or that sort of cunning folk version of witchcraft. So how do you manage your storytelling around what's going on currently?
It's a funny one because sometimes it can be hard when you're deciding how you're going to present some folklore or a folk tale because you don't necessarily want to impose like 21st century values on an older story because it's not that the values are wrong. It's just that if you do that, you can lose like the historical context of the original
Mm.
story. So sometimes it's quite good just to do both. And here's the story, here's what we can learn from it, but here's how this applies in a modern perspective. So you can have that both and sort of nuance
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I think if you're looking at some of the figures from other parts of the world, like there's some that I was looking at in South America, which were like a reaction to sort of the conquistadors and so on. To update that from a modern perspective, you then lose looking at the fact that that was obviously an impact of imperialism. So it's important to remember why that's the way that it is. But then at the same time, you can obviously then look at but how does that story then resonate for people now? And on the other hand, you don't always need to update them because a lot of them have really similar themes, even if the window dressing is different. So a lot of them about like betrayal, loss, unrequited love's a big one. People are upset about things, griefs in that, but there's a lot of silliness and joy in just people being cunning and things like that. So I think that humans don't really change, ultimately, and I think that it is interesting to kind of look at the original context that produced the story, but then you're like, what can we take out of it now? So it's kind of looking at it
Mm.
from that perspective rather than necessarily retelling them. Just because I think it is important to look at what people thought were important enough to put in the stories when they first started telling them. And that's quite useful because then you can just go, yeah, nothing's changed.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing because it's like, well, so from studying folklore, obviously we can learn a lot about the past and what concerned people in the past. But are there lessons in it for today, do you think? Or like, do you find lessons that could be applied to our modern lives?
Yeah, and I think one of the things is more about folklore as a category, and it's like what people decide to collect and what people decide is important to preserve. That in and of itself is something that I think we need to pay attention to because obviously this happens when you look at like who decides which stories get preserved.
Mhm.
We have that problem anyway because obviously there is a bias towards sort of white presenting people in preserving stories. So even just looking at who wrote it down in the first place and why is an important thing to bear in mind. And I think it's also but at the same time, it's valuable to see what people actually thought was important at that moment in time. Um, and I think because a lot of people, when a lot of this would have been getting collected, would have either been illiterate or sort of not as literate as we are, shall we say. Their way of passing on information was obviously orally, so that engaging with what was collected is the only way we've got to know what these people actually thought and valued and believed. I do think there are some people who quite clearly made stuff up for the folklorist's benefit, probably to make fun of them, because sometimes you read something and go, that's just too, you were pulling their leg, weren't you? Um, and so there is a little bit of a trickster element even in some of the stuff, but I think that
I love
even
that.
there we can obviously learn something from that as well. And I think um I looked at some stuff around animals in particular, and it was just some of the weird remedies that people had. And there's often this kind of thing of, oh, people then had more wisdom. It's like, oh, they really didn't. Um they still were going along with things that clearly weren't going to help, but because they didn't have maybe the awareness that we do, like there was a one about involving cutting open a sheep and sticking your head in it to cure tuberculosis. Antibiotics are obviously a better option, but if we don't
Yes.
have antibiotics, so again,
There
this
wasn't
is
some
what I mean.
flora in the sheep's gut that might have been helpful. I mean, I don't know. I'm really
I mean,
grasping
this
at
is the thing,
straws.
we don't know what the mechanism behind it was. But I think my constant bone of contention is the fact that there's always this bias in British folklore anyway towards rural communities, and
Mm.
nobody was collecting what was happening in cities. And it's like there's this whole body of knowledge because they were decided to be like too worldly wise to write and like to have these kind of beliefs and superstitions, but they were quite clearly still practicing seasonal sort of celebrations and things. So I'm kind of like, but what were they doing? So that's what I mean about folklore's got quite a lot of teachers in terms of who preserved it and why, rather than necessarily what was
Yeah,
preserved.
So is that
that
like a
feels like,
whole,
yeah.
oh, sorry, Sarah.
No, go, go, go,
Is
please.
that like a whole area that's kind of unknown, like what was happening in the cities? Is
I
it
think it is there to a degree. I think it's just in the wrong sources, if that makes sense. Because I
right?
know in Ronald Hutton's Stations of the Sun book, he does look at what people were doing for certain things. Like for example, for May Day in Newcastle, where I am, women would make floral garlands and then sell them in the street to people so they could decorate the houses. So we
Right.
know that that was a thing that people in my city did
Right.
in like the 17th, 18th century. But that wasn't in an archive that was collected by a folklorist. I've no idea where that information came from. It was
Mm.
probably tax records or something like that. And it's just, I think some of the folklore has been overlooked rather than lost because it's in a bit that no one's looking at. But no collect, or very few collectors actually went out into cities and actually just explicitly asked people, "What are you doing?" I mean, that would be a bit of a weird thing to ask most people in cities. Like, I can imagine when I lived in London, if you just went up to someone and went, "What you doing?" They'd be like, "Why? Don't talk to me." So I think that
There's
that
like
in and of
Instagram
itself,
influencers who do that now. They accost people on the street and go, "What are
Yeah.
your dreams?" And you go,
we,
"Ah, I don't know. Leave me alone."
yeah, it
Yeah,
would just be an odd thing to do, wouldn't it? So I think,
yeah.
yeah, that's part of the problem. But I think the stuff probably has been handed down. I think in a way with some of the stuff that people still do, but don't necessarily know why. Particularly around like seasonal things. A lot of that will have actually come from urban areas. A bit like how we celebrate Christmas. A lot of that will, because it's the 19th century, there was a lot of industrialization and urbanization. So a lot of what people were doing would have been urban traditions. Oh, and obviously a lot of it we got from A Christmas Carol, let's be honest. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think this is the thing. Literature is quite a good place to find some of this stuff as well. So lots of it does get preserved in really weird places, like the Diaries of Samuel Pepys. The stuff that man wrote down, you just, but if it's really invaluable for me, but then at the
Yeah.
same time, you're like, why did you write about this? But yeah, it's useful for us though.
Yeah.
That's amazing because I do think a lot of us have that affinity with nature, like both of you do, and really can connect to something enchanted when we're out in it. But there is something magical about cities as well, and there isn't that same association with the stories that we tell.
Yeah.
There's a weird thing that you get with the city-based ones where that you really get to see people's ingenuity and innovation and creativity. So again, for May Day, there was a whole load of stuff about like people in Manchester and these like really industrial cities couldn't find greenery. So they just decorated with ribbons and rosettes and things that they'd made themselves. And I'm like, well, okay, that's really cool. That's also really accessible to people who maybe don't have access to nature. So that's something that can be sort of passed on. So I think it's really important to look at that as well,
Mm.
to see basically what people were making do with in terms of what was
Yeah.
around them. And it just, you kind of go, yeah, that's really cool. Because like, who doesn't like a good colourful ribbon, you know? So I think it's nice sometimes when you see how people adjusted things, um, or alternatively, like made use of whatever green space was available. And I think for so many people now who live in cities, that's probably more useful than finding out what people were doing, who were sort of far from their local village or town, which is still important and good to know and needed, but it's not always directly replicable
Mm.
for people who might live in the middle of, I don't know, Hammersmith. So it's I lived in
That's
Hammersmith, you see,
not too
that's where
far
my
from
brain went
me.
there first.
Yeah, no, I'm just down the river from Hammersmith.
I love Hammersmith.
Yeah, me too.
I'm far, far away from Hammersmith.
Yeah.
But I suppose like well, I think we had this question kind of written down later, but it seems to follow on well when you were saying that you wouldn't kind of knock on someone's door now and say, "Hey, what are you doing in the cities?" Um, but is there kind of an aspect of like folklore that you see kind of being made in the modern day? Like, you know, how is it made? Like, is it only something in the past or is it something that's actively being made now? Do you know what I mean? Like, we have people walking around these influencers, I suppose, or these creators with their meta glasses and kind of like accosting people on the street and talking to them about what they believe or, this, that, the other. But do you see in this digital age kind of any room for the development of new folklore? Like, or have you witnessed anything yourself?
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things is what we would consider folklore. In some ways, the baton got picked up by urban legends,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very, very similar, particularly to the cautionary tale version of folklore. So when you look at folklore, a really good example would be the being Jenny Greenteeth, who back in the day very much a northern Britain thing, but she was believed to be like this witch that would live in rivers and should drag children in and eat them if they got too close. But the fact that Jenny Greenteeth is also a nickname for duckweed, which looks like grass, but if you stood on it, it wouldn't. It would be on the top of the water. Um, it's obviously a good way to keep people away from water where A, they probably couldn't swim, but B, duckweed's going to tangle you up anyway.
Yeah.
You've got that as the old version, but then you move forward to the urban legend, and there's like the famous one where the guy gets picked up by a stranger in a bar, and then he wakes up in a bathtub and one of his kidneys is missing. And it's about that sort of cautionary tale of like, and obviously they tend more towards the dangers posed by other humans rather than the other world, which I think is quite telling. But I think urban legends definitely ran with that. And you get them occasionally. It was like that weird Momo thing where people were convinced that this like I can't even remember what the story was behind that because I just found it so odd. Or even like when people started going to the particular part of America where the Blair Witch Project was filmed to go and engage with that legend that was made up for the film.
Mm.
So I think that's really interesting how people, because again, people are really inventive. They'll take something and run with it. Cryptids do it as well, which is something that's really sort of taken off. Now people have camera phones with them all the time, way more sightings than you might imagine. And I think that the other thing that with folklore is a funny one is because it can include all kinds of tradition and just things that people do. Good luck superstitions, people will have them. People will scoff at them, but they will absolutely have like a pair of socks that they always win for, wear like for their sport team to win or something, or like people will have family traditions around the way that they celebrate particular things. Like we always watch Die Hard on Christmas Eve because it's like, why wouldn't you? And like I always do the first footing at New Year,
Mm.
which obviously was a tradition in the Northeast and in Scotland and Ireland anyway. But I
What
then
is
picked
that?
it up in it's where you go out just before midnight on the 31st of December.
Uh-huh.
And I can do this because I've got a front and the back of my house, but otherwise you go out and you come back in. And you go out on the 31st and basically knock on the door and someone lets you back in on the 1st of January and you bring certain items in to bring like good cheer, luck, wealth, and health in back into the house again. Women aren't supposed to do it, but that hasn't stopped me.
I love that.
And at least I think there used to be this idea that there was certain like good figures were to be in bad figures. So depending on like hair color and stuff. Like I can't remember which way round it is though.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be blonde or red haired. And
Okay.
thankfully, as I'm a brunette, it's not really so much of a problem. I'm
Sorted.
the wrong
Yeah.
gender, as it were. But I'm like, well,
Two
it,
out of three boxes ticked. Like it's fine. Two
Between
thirds
yeah.
of the luck. Yeah.
exactly.
So
That's so
I do think through things like that, though, that's where, and people all have their own little things that they'll always do. Like you could argue, if you wanted to, that when people set up like morning routines and it becomes a tradition, it's their tradition, but it's still a
mm,
tradition. Um, I mean, I'm not going to claim my morning coffee at work just so I can get through the rest of the day is necessarily a tradition. It's a necessity. But you know what I mean? It's like those kind of things that
yeah.
people do, I think do become a form of folklore. And you get a lot around plant remedies as well. There's a whole website, plant-law.com, where Roy Vickery's just collecting like things people remember about plants, and it's so interesting
Well, you've just done
Oh
a
how A,
series
wow.
on that on your podcast.
Yeah.
You have a
yeah, and
few
it's just it's
episodes.
the plant one is the one that I think people engage with possibly the most easily because things get passed down. Like, it doesn't work, but you know the whole rubbing a dock leaf on a nettle sting, and that gets dock leaves do not help nettle stings. It just got nothing to do with it. That's
Noted.
just nonsense. But you do
Tell
it
my mum.
anyway. You do it anyway. So it's kind of, but it's because it's passed on through families more easily, I think. I think that's where certain remedies do keep popping up periodically. And so I think the folklore is something everybody, because it's, without being funny, it is like the lore of the folk. It is like people's knowledge, as it were. I think that's why it does continue. And I have a feeling it's going to be influenced by the use of AI. There's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of weird stuff going to come out because AI hallucinates things. And if it says, oh, yes, it was absolutely the done thing that this particular weird thing happened, somebody will believe it without fact checking.
Guaranteed.
Yeah. But so I think that there'll probably be quite a lot of digitally created folklore at some point as well. I mean, there already is. Some of the bad takes I see on Irish deities in particular is frightening. But I think it just shows that people have an intrinsic tendency towards trying to engage with the world around them and then share how they do that, and then thus folklore.
So I have seen some stories emerging around the digital sphere, like about liminal spaces online and back rooms. And I'm not an expert in this at all, but yeah, if you can expand on those ideas a little bit, because that's sort of where I'm beginning to see those ideas coming through.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like I did my PhD on haunted houses, and one of the things that was really big in that was liminal spaces, and it irritates me no end that people keep calling the back rooms liminal spaces and they're not.
Okay,
Because a liminal
okay,
space is it's a bit between. So like a doorway is liminal, but the rooms on either side are not because they're defined spaces.
yeah.
And back
Sorry,
rooms
just
itself
for
be
the old lady in the chat, what's a back room?
it's like an internet phenomenon that's come out where it's this the people are able to get into almost this like other realm that just looks how to describe it is really weird because some people describe it as looking like abandoned shopping malls, some people think it looks like office buildings, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Gosh, it's
It's it,
weird.
it's really
Yeah.
cool again the way people have picked up this concept and run with it and made their own art and engaged with it, but it is not liminal.
It's, yeah, the
Yeah.
idea of getting, as far as I understand it, people, the like ghost story or haunted story, the spooky side is like this idea that something would be able or someone would be able to get lost in the back rooms as well, like the back rooms of the internet. So it's
Mm.
like you've got the internet up front, what we browse, the web, and then you've got everything else building up behind, and it's sort of visualized as this old abandoned warehouse or these old like hotel rooms all connecting, but there's all of these tunnels going nowhere.
And these
And
are
it's this
digital.
idea, sorry?
These are digital
Yeah,
spaces, not
digital.
like physical spaces where a person can go.
But it's not like a real space. It's something which I think has just emerged from like the next generation, from the kids, about what is behind the internet because they're always on the internet and it's what is this behind? What's there? And this idea of like this spooky idea of getting lost in the woods, it's a spooky idea of getting lost in what is behind the internet. And that's very much the dark web, right? That's like what's
That's so
behind. It's that other
interesting.
cautionary tale of like you could get lost in that what you're where you're not meant to be on the internet. It's the behind the internet, as I understand it.
Gosh, I live such a
What's really
sheltered.
funny from a folklore point of view as well is a lot of the ways that you see it depicted, you're like, that's the other world. That's where you've got this person has crossed into the other world. And I thought it was
Right.
really interesting in the film, the fact that like the guy who sort of first goes in and then he's like eating stuff while he's there. So, oh man, you don't eat in the other world because you'll get stuck there.
Oh,
And that's precisely what happened. So it's really interesting that it's basically taken all of these ideas that would be in like the collective unconscious and just updated them for a new format. And again, that's just I think this is why like human ingenuity is so important
Mm,
because a computer couldn't come up with that because because it requires taking these disparate ideas and then putting them together in a really weird way that only I think a human could. So full props to the guy who came up with it. Like it is genuinely really like a cool phenomenon. Um, and there's loads of other terms that could be applied to it. Eerie is one of them.
yeah,
Um, but it's just nice to see, I think, people getting on board and making their own content to fit in with that shared world as well. That's really cool.
mm.
yeah,
My mind is blown. Like, just sometimes you learn something and you realize, oh, there's an entire blind spot
oh
that
yeah.
I've
I
just not
only
engaged with.
heard about this at all in the last year, and it's been going on for like a decade or more,
Mm.
if not. It's like so, like yeah. Both of us. Somebody used the term back rooms. They were talking about like a fly getting lost in our house, and it was like, oh, it's like it's lost in the back rooms. It can't get out. And I was like, what? Back rooms? This is the front room. This is the living room.
And
What are
then
you
you
talking
heard
about?
about that's how you
And
heard
then
about it.
yeah.
So
From
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so your latest book, Fate or Fortune, explores divination through history and folklore. Um, we love divination here. We love a mancy.
As we
Um,
call them.
we call them mancies. um, but one thing that we repeatedly talk about when we're talking about mancies and divination is this concept of fate and predestiny. Do you believe in fate, or do you believe that our fortunes are more impacted by chance?
I think it's definitely more chance.
Yeah.
I think because I tried to think about this one day. I was probably in a meeting at work, I would imagine, and I was thinking, could fate even work? And I try to think of it in terms of like the admin that would be required to keep track of everybody's fate on Earth, plus everything you were going to interact with. And I thought, oh God, the nightmare. That would be awful to try and manage the filing for that. Um,
Yeah.
so I thought of it in a very odd kind of way. But I don't know. I just don't think that I don't like the concept of fate that some people's fate is like to not even get to experience life, and then other people, um, you know, and I think it's too easy for people to sort of write off bad decisions as fate. And I don't like it when something awful happens to someone. Oh, well, it was meant to be. What? What a weird thing to
Yeah.
say to people. I think it's all just random chance, really.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think some of it's not always random, and sometimes choices that you've made make sense when you look back on them, and you can spot a pattern that you couldn't have spotted going forwards. You can only see it going backwards. Um, but then I suppose you could argue, does someone with more power than you choose to intervene and change the current that you're flowing in a little bit, or maybe, make the journey a bit easier? Maybe, I don't know.
Mm.
But I don't like the idea of it. I just think it excuses too much stuff. And I feel like this is probably going to sound controversial, but some people kind of almost use like some idea of like a divine plan to sort of be like almost act like a chosen one. And I think it sometimes feels a bit like main character syndrome for me.
Yeah.
So again, I'm like, I don't know that I think that's true. I think a lot of what happens in life is you're in the right place at the right time or you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. How you choose to deal with that, I think, is where divination then becomes useful because it then gives you an additional set of perspectives, an additional set of options you might not have noticed, like you said about blind spots. I've had this before when I've done like a tarot reading and I've thought, oh, I'm going to do this or that. And then the tarot go, but what about this thing over here? And I'm like, I hadn't even considered that. Thank you. And
Hmm.
that's usually been the right one.
Yeah.
Because you can't think everything. You can't see everything. You can't like, see what's behind you if unless you turn around sort of thing. So I feel like divination's a really good way to get you to take a step back and look at the wider picture.
Like being in conversation with
Mhm.
your future and your
Yeah.
past, but yeah, not
Yeah.
necessarily foretelling it.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously then there's so many different philosophies about divination. So many people have their own um sort of conceptions of like what's the difference between like fortune telling and divination, for example, and things like that. And I think everyone's going to have come at this from their own reasoning and things, and I think that's where all of them have the equal possibility of being the right answer. So
Okay.
it's one of those kind of things where there is not necessarily a right or wrong. People just have what's right or wrong for them, which is quite nice actually that you've got this plethora of options, and you get to work out where you stand on it.
Yeah. And not to give away too many spoilers for your new book, but in your research for it, what was the most obscure divination technique that you came across, like that people are using or have used?
I mean, there are some really interesting ones involving things like shoulder blades from animals and so on. But when you actually, yeah, it was in I want to say it was in North America. And it's a way that you heat them and you make them crack, and then you can almost read them like a map for where to go hunting. But it actually makes perfect sense in a way because of the fact that like the person whose article and research I was reading about this was saying if you just hunted where you knew that there was going to be food, you overhunt an area. Whereas if you then introduce, and the animals then know to avoid you because they know that you're going to go there because they're not stupid. So you're going to sort of shoot yourself in the foot a bit. Whereas if you're then introducing an element of randomness by then going off what the map says instead, um, you're basically kind of shaking things up a little bit and everything's not just becoming routine. And it's the randomness where, yeah, you might then go out and have an unsuccessful hunt, but then the next time you do that, the animals have moved there to get away from where you were, and now you're where they are. So it's really, really interesting looking at how it worked, but it also works on the animistic principle that you would be also gaining the information from the spirits of the animal you were trying to hunt, almost like they were guiding you to where they are. Because obviously you can't have a population getting
Snitches.
too big, because then it then
Yeah.
over sort of decimates an area.
Oh,
That's such an interesting thing. I know it's
that's
the
incredible. Well,
concept of an animal
you're
dobbing in
selling
its
two books
brethren.
here. Yeah, dobbing you in.
If I had to
Yeah.
die, you're going to die with me. I am not suffering this alone. This is very Lisa coded. Um, um, uh, so, do you practice? Well, you mentioned that you'll do a tarot reading. So, do you practice apart from tarot, like divination and scrying yourself, like any kind of witchy practices yourself on a regular basis?
Yeah, I do. I do like tarot. Um, I started learning the Boolean oracle rather, which is a French system. And my God, that doesn't pull its punches. It will quite happily be like, just don't do that.
Really?
Um,
What's it
yeah,
called?
We could maybe
the
use a bit
Boolean,
of
so it's
that.
Belline. Because it's from France, there aren't as many resources about it in English, but there is one book called Mastering Boolean, by I think it's Serge Perrault on Amazon, which is really good because he's sort of the guy that sort of popularized it in the English speaking world. And I've done a class with him, and it's really good learning how the Boolean works. Because the cards are kind of set into they're not suits so much, but like these ones are Marshall cards, and these ones are Venus cards, and these ones are Sun cards, and that can then help you go, oh well, this card is like one of the Venus ones, so it's kind of bound to be something a bit nicer. Whereas if you get one of the Mars ones, it's like, oh, game over. All of the Mars ones are really negative,
Mars is always
which is
ruining
a shame because I
everything.
love Mars as an astrological force. I'm a bit like, oh, um, but yeah, so I quite like that one. And yeah, because there's a lot of card-based ones in there for what I do.
Yeah.
Um, but I do like a good sort of just paying attention to what's going on and like kind of almost finding oracles around you, which is kind of the way that I think people
Mm.
probably would have done a lot of this to start with.
Mhm.
Um, and I sometimes it's that sort of passive sense where just something crosses your path so unexpectedly that you're like, oh, that feels like it's important in some way. But I kind of prefer going out with the question in mind because otherwise I just get distracted by whatever the thing was, and then my attention span's shot anyway. So it's kind of I prefer going out and sort of thinking, what would be helpful to know about this situation. And 9 times out of 10, it's a weird plant that I haven't seen in the area before that catches me attention. And and then I'll go off and look up like what does the plant mean and all that kind of thing. So
Mm.
um that's also a good way to get off my phone when I'm walking anywhere as well.
On
Yeah.
your blog, yeah, well, yeah, same. We all need that. But it just reminds me that on your blog and your podcast recently, you have been exploring herbalism and people who have worked with herbs in the past. And are there any plants that you do feel particularly drawn to or like to work with, like other than the yew tree and its poison, of course? But is there anything that when you see it, you take it as a very fortunate sign, or
I absolutely adore irises.
oh,
Um
lovely?
and so that they're always fun to see. In terms of working with, I'm always convinced I'm going to accidentally like poison myself with something or whatever. So I'm a bit funny about like what I'll take internally.
Mm.
But I do a lot with lemon balm, because lemon balm's just lovely. I love lemon balm tea. It's like the nicest thing. And I use fennel tea as well. So I kind of work with them in drink form because it's sort of a much easier way to deal with them. Let's be honest, you can't really get past working with coffee. It is a plant. And then I suppose cocoa would or cacao would be included in that as well. Which I just learned is in the same family as hibiscus, and
Oh,
cotton, weirdly.
Wait, cotton, hibiscus, and cocoa, all the same
Yeah,
family.
I think they're in the mallow family. Yeah, it's weird.
In the mallow family. What is happening?
Yeah.
and
It's
are
even
there
funnier when you
any?
look at the
Yeah.
nightshades though, and then you've got like deadly nightshade like belladonna and tomatoes and potatoes.
Yes.
So it's kind of like there's always one member of the family nobody wants around. Yeah, the
Could be the
solanaceae
weird
really
witchy
get that.
neighbor.
But I think most plants I'm always quite happy to see. Like even just
Mm.
the humble dandelion, I love dandelions. They're
Uh,
just so cheerful and they will grow anywhere. And I think that there's
You
quite
should
a lot
come
you
to
can
see
learn
my
about them
garden
as a
right
weed.
now. Full of them.
are there any properties like specifically like associated with dandelions, like from a folklore perspective?
I mean, they're a funny one because they're nearly always associated with the fact that it's a diuretic. So there's lots of things about, like if you picked a dandelion, parents would tell their kids, oh, it means you'll wet the bed and stuff like that. And it's just because as a plant, it does actually have use as a diuretic.
Mm.
But they're also fabulous for the gardens. This isn't a folklore thing, it's just what they're actually like because they've got such long tap roots that bring nutrients from really far down higher up for other plants to use. So they're quite I always like to see them as sort of being like that kind of cheerleader person that's like pepping everybody else up and making sure everyone else is okay. That's kind of dandelions.
Mhm.
And obviously there's all the stuff around blowing the seeds.
Yeah.
If you're
Making a
telling the
wish.
time, if you're making a wish, sending messages, and they've got loads of folk names as well. So there's a lot more about the dandelion clocks than the flowers.
What's it? Wait,
But
dandelion clock. I've not heard of it.
you know when you get like the seed head and they've got all like the fluffy little
Yeah.
seeds, and then you blow them and they all fly off.
Yes.
And it was the idea that I think it was how many blows it took to get all of the seeds off is what time it was. Doesn't work.
You're like, believe me, I've tried. And I was
But
really
yeah,
late that day.
they're nice to have in the garden because, like this year, I noticed we had greenfinches and goldfinches actually picking the seeds out and eating them, and
Mm,
I'd never had them in my garden before. So I was just like, oh yeah, I get to see an unusual for me bird. Me, goldfinches and greenfinches aren't necessarily properly unusual, but they're uncommon for me. I'm just from dandelions, so
that's amazing. Yeah,
Excellent.
I do love dandelions. I mean, they're introduced here. Obviously, they're not a native thing, but I really do enjoy them. And we're not supposed to, blow them around and make more, but I'm not passing up an opportunity for a wish ever.
Well, absolutely. I love when you just see, like, I'm not sure if it's always just dandelions, but when you do see those little clouds and those little seeds in the middle,
Yes.
just sort of going through the air, and it's like just like a little reminder that, okay, there's wishes, there's just something, I don't know if it's like childhood nostalgia, but there's something just a little bit magical about seeing them
Yeah.
always.
I've been
Yeah.
stumbling across a lot of native orchids recently on my
Oh,
walks through. We have
cool.
little bits of bushland around here where I live, and I
that
came
sounds
across the most
gorgeous.
beautiful. It's called a green nodding hood, and there were just like a little bunch of them, and they were so lovely. I get really about it, but I don't know that there's any folklore associated with them from here. I think this is why I pine to come to England because it's so full of those stories. I mean, obviously, with our native plants here and our indigenous people, there is, uh, you know, native law, and but it hasn't necessarily made it into the colonial culture. Really, it's just seen as very other, which I think is a shame. And potentially it's kind of coming in a little bit more. But in that, do you think that the places make the folklore? Like, is it very, very tied to place, or can it kind of be taken from somewhere and brought to somewhere else and, like really become set in to another place? Or
I
does it
would say
belong somewhere?
it's a funny one because the answer's yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the reason why I say yes, folklore absolutely can travel is because it's really, really difficult to find. Actually, it's not really difficult. Certain stories, you can find versions of them all over the place and they'll just change the location. The
Mm-hmm.
fairy midwife story, for example, where this midwife gets taken to go and help deliver a baby, and she's given some ointment to put on the baby's eyes, but told that under no circumstances can this touch your eyes. And in some of them, she does it on purpose. Most of them, she just rubs her eyes because she's tired and forgets. Because, like, let's be honest, you would. It's like whenever you're cutting chilies, you can guarantee that's when you'll need to rub your eye.
Always.
Yeah.
And then she realizes that she can see through the glamour, and she's just delivered a fairy baby. She gets paid though. She goes home, everything's fine, but then one day she sees the fairy husband stealing food at the market. He realizes she's seen them, and he's like, "Which eye can you see out of?" And in the version from Northumberland where I am, the fairy blows in her eye and she can't see out of that eye anymore. There are versions of that all over the place. There are variations to the story. Like in some of them, the woman that the midwife is helping to deliver, the woman's actually her long lost daughter who's been stolen by the fairies in one of them. And there's a version again from Northumberland where the doctor goes and he deliberately rubs it on his eyes, thinking he's going to make some money out of it. Doesn't end well for him. So I quite like that one because it's like no hubris for you. Um, and uh, and those kind of stories, because you find so many versions of them in so many places, it's like someone's taken the skeleton of a story and then set it in that particular location. So the one I told you at the beginning about the dragon at Bamborough, that one appears in loads of different places as well, but everyone has a way of making it theirs. Um, King Arthur is an excellent example of this. So many people can lay claim to King Arthur, but you can't definitively prove any of them, so they're all right and wrong at the same time. But I think that people will create folklore about the places that they interact with. But my question is, where do the ideas come from? Because you do sometimes come across stories that are so specific to that place.
Mm.
You do think, well, where did that come from? Who were you interacting with? And by who, I do mean, was it someone of the other world? Was it some kind of supernatural encounter that you've had? And or has a traveller brought that to town and then it's kind of stuck? So I think that there is a lot to be said for stories that can travel. Um, but then I think the ones that travel do tend to at least travel in similar, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like landscape. So you're not going to get like desert folklore in East Anglia, for example, because it's all like, flattened fens and all that kind of thing. So I think there is, something about that. But ultimately, people will find a way to make a story that they like work. But what's really interesting was ages ago now, this was like 2021, I think it was. I asked on Twitter, like, how did people come to folklore? And me being me, I got all the answers and I put them into categories.
Mm.
And one of the most popular categories was people got into folklore because they like to read about either the places where they lived or the places where they were visiting because it helped them get to know the place better. So I think that there's something intrinsic in people about wanting to know the stories of the land that they're on, whether they're a visitor or a permanent resident. So I think that place is really important to folklore, but I don't always necessarily think it's entirely specific unless there's a legitimately specific reason why that story is in that particular place.
Hmm.
This may not be like your specific area of expertise, being based in the UK and not Australia, as Lisa is, but with colonialism and just the erasure of a lot of Indigenous culture there, do you know, is there any work going on to sort of try and revive stories that perhaps have been either pushed to the side or lost for a few generations and to bring that back and to, I don't know, re engage with the stories that perhaps were a bit more oppressed?
I think it depends on where you are. Because I know when I did the Rebel Folklore book and I included an Indigenous American story, so I did Raven, who's absolutely fabulous. I love Raven. And one of my friends is actually a member of the Salish people. And so I messaged her and I was just like, is it okay if I include Raven? And like, where do I start? And luckily, her cousin was like the creative director of the tribe. And there'd been some exhibitions where they were obviously sharing stories and artifacts and things about Raven. So I started there. And some of the stories, it's like, it's quite interesting where if they've come from the culture, there's some of them which are to be shared with outsiders and other ones which aren't. And I sort of think that that's totally understandable. Um, and I think the beauty of the ones which are shared with outsiders is where they're the ones where people can kind of still find a point of empathy or understanding or like, oh yeah, no, I totally get that. Resonance, that's the word I'm looking for.
Connection, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think ultimately it depends on the culture, and I can absolutely understand why a culture would be like, no, these are ours, we don't want to share them with you. Because like, let's be honest, it hasn't ended well in the past. So I can
Yeah,
understand that. And I think there's a lot of work being done within those communities to preserve them within the communities, which
right.
is cool. And at least it means that the stories are being preserved and passed on, and then probably I would imagine evolving to suit the contemporary context as well. But there are obviously some people who will also then kind of share outwards. And then you realize actually how people kind of are quite similar in their preoccupations. A really good example of that is Munya Andrews actually wrote a book who's Indigenous Australian, and she wrote about the Pleiades constellation and how there's a lot of myths within Indigenous Australian thought about the Pleiades, not myths, actually just stories about them. But you find very similar ones in North America, in India. All of these different cultures have very, very similar stories about the Pleiades. So she collected them all together in this book. So I highly recommend that. I'd recommend it to like, anyone I'd be sitting next to on the bus, really. But I'm like, you have to read this book because the Pleiades is one of my favorite constellations. But it's just really interesting when you look at it from her perspective, where she started with the stories of her childhood, really, and then found them in other places. I think that's really valuable, and I think that's where it is really important to hand the microphone to people from all different communities because
Mm-hmm.
they've got really unique perspectives, and they've got just as much space to take up as anyone else, really. So I think it's really, really valuable when people do work like that. And also, like, nobody else would have thought to necessarily connect all of those stories together unless it was a story they were that familiar with. So again,
Mm,
this is where I think Munya's work's really, really interesting.
that
I'll
sounds
be looking
amazing.
up her work.
Yeah,
That is
can
fascinating.
can you maybe tell us just a little bit about Raven?
Yeah.
Raven's really funny. He's very much a trickster figure.
Okay.
And he's quite funny because in a lot of the stories, he ends up helping humans, but sort of by accident. So sometimes he does it on purpose. Like there's one of the
Okay.
stories where a person has basically stolen the sun and hidden it away. And Raven's like, well, this isn't ending well for anybody. So basically tricks the guy into releasing the sun. But then in the process, I think he burns his claws, and that's why Raven's black, I think, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
But he often gets involved in stuff where he's very helpful, but not necessarily for the right reasons. But ultimately, because he's helpful, it
amazing.
sort of it kind of works out quite well for humans in the end. He's really,
It's
really
out in the
interesting.
bush. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Oh,
It, oh, go on.
please go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to take a little left turn just
Hmm.
because, it's always fun to ask. But how do you feel about ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts? Have you seen a ghost?
I used to work as a ghost hunter actually at one point. And I've got feelings about that now because I actually did a talk a little while ago about the ethics of ghost hunting, and I realized how
Oh,
horrifically unethical a lot of ghost hunting has become.
oh.
I do believe in ghosts. I
Mhm.
don't I don't know that I've ever seen one, but I've definitely had really weird experiences. But it's usually through sound, where have not been able to find out what a logical. Because I'm so much like Spock, I'm like this has got to have a logical explanation.
I
But then if I
welcome.
can't
Yeah.
find one, it can only be supernatural. So it's kind of a way of sitting on the fence, I guess. Um, but yeah, so I think ghosts have become really, really big business again recently because they
Yeah.
do this. They work in cycles. They disappear for a while and then they pop up and everyone's like, ah, a ghost, and then everyone forgets about them again. Um, and so they're just in fashion again.
Yeah.
And I'm here
Uh-huh.
for it.
Excellent.
Okay, amazing.
Um, and sorry, I was just it's a little
Go
bit
ahead.
rapid fire, I know, but
Yeah,
and a
yeah.
little bit kind of non sequitur, but we have talked a lot about, like the ethics of certain branches of magic or
Hmm.
like magical practice. And love magic is one that really, we explored quite early on. In fact, that was our
Hmm.
quite early on. That was our
Very
first episode.
first episode. Yeah.
And we kind of came to the conclusion that, we didn't love the idea of love magic and that we probably wouldn't engage with it. But how do you feel about it? I mean, there'd be a lot of, um, you'd probably come across a lot of that in your work. And yeah, kind of what have you seen about it that maybe we haven't heard? And what do you feel about love magic in general?
I find it fascinating. I mean, I wrote a whole book about it,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I think the thing that I find really interesting is when you look at love magic and love divination as a subject area. A lot of the divination is basically like, am I going to meet someone this year? Or like, can I see a vision of them? Because it's very much more just information seeking, I always sort of feel a bit like, "Nah," you know, that's no different from like asking a magic eight ball, you know what I mean? Um, and then on the other hand, you've got the love magic, which can really be divided into two. And you've either got the type where it's worked on yourself, so it's like I want to appear more attractive, and obviously that's a loaded term in and of itself, because obviously that's going to depend on what the other person finds attractive. Um, or it can be like I want more confidence, or I just want to meet more people, in which case you're just, even in the odds a little bit in your favor. And those kind of ones, I always feel like those practices, I sort of don't really see much of a problem with because there's not a second party involved really. It's, because it's no different from you doing some work if you're trying to get a job and you're trying to make your CV look more attractive. Or can you get it past the AI these days? That kind of thing. You're just trying to increase the odds in your favor, which is what a lot of folk magic has always been. So there's always an ethic there because obviously if you then get that particular person as a partner, then somebody else hasn't. So there's always going to be a bit of an ethical issue. But I think what's really interesting is when I was looking at a lot of these different things, the love magic that was done by or on behalf of men, really quite nasty. Always targeted an individual. There's a couple of practices which don't target an individual, but it's obvious what the bloke's looking for. And there's a lot about coercion and I want this woman to sleep with me even though she's married, etc., etc. Quite a lot of nasty stuff in there. When you look at the stuff that women are doing by comparison, it's often more along the lines of trying to meet someone, trying to get the person you're already with to get in contact with you. So it seems ghosting has been quite a common thing for quite a while, or
Right.
trying to get like certainty in some way. And I think that says quite a lot about the preoccupations of people in the past. And I think when I did the spells in the book, I didn't give enough information for any of the nasty coercion ones to actually be workable. So
Right.
it's
It's
like,
not a manual.
and I mean, generally speaking, I always say to fellas, if you want to meet a woman, be kind, thoughtful, and have a compatible sense of humor. That will take you further than anything else. And go out and do things. Don't just sit in the house.
Yeah.
Um, that's my advice to any fellas listening. Because you need to actually meet people. And my webcam's obviously decided to
You
go a bit
can't.
funny.
Soft
I'm in like
focus.
the William Shatner soft focus now. Um, but then the focus I tried to put in was more about like, the wide, I'd like to meet someone.
Yeah.
Please send me someone who would be a good fit for me. So it's much more um open to other forces can then go, I think he'd be a really good fit for her. So like they can match make a little bit.
Yeah.
I kind of preferred that one. Or again, you're opening it up to chance because the more people you meet, in theory, the better chance you have of meeting someone who's compatible for you. So I sort of put that in the book that really the only spells you should be doing are ones on yourself because you're the only variable,
Yes.
really. Or some of them are obviously like reassurance, like will I meet someone this year? But then if you get a no, just do it again next year. It's fine. None of them are forever, which I thought was really nice. They've always got a time-based element to them, which is quite cool.
Okay.
And
Oh, I
that's the
like
book Bring
that.
Me Love, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that phrase you use, just increase the odds in your favor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very much so. Yeah.
Leave the house. Okay.
Making a note there. So, in all of your work with the storytelling, something we look at a lot here is reenchantment. It's something that we've really taken to heart, sort of in reintroducing a little bit of magic, mystery, sacredness into our everyday lives and looking to see where that exists already. And it seems like storytelling is a big part of that as well, just in the ways that you both understand your story or are looking for potential ways that the story could go through divination and everything. Um, Both within storytelling and without it, how do you find that you fit in with like the world of witchcraft? Do you consider yourself somebody who's either witchy or a witch, or do you put yourself in any sort of category like that?
I always hate labels.
Okay.
And I think it's because even just the word witch itself is quite loaded. And you're like, well, which historical definition are we working from? Because I'm
Yeah.
awkward like that. Um,
So
but
are
I would
we.
definitely say clearly like occult inclined, I think, is probably the best way of put because that covers a wide gamut of stuff.
Occult
Um,
inclined. I might
yeah.
be using that.
And and I think yeah, talking about the idea of like an enchanted life and everything, I think folklore is quite good for that because of the fact that this has become like more of a thing, I think, recently because of social media. But I know people were doing this in the 19th century where you go like folklore tripping, where you'll go to places associated with a folktale. So I went to Melrose Abbey a couple of weeks ago as part of research for a book, but there's stories involving Melrose Abbey. They also have a grotesque of a bagpipe playing pig. I mean, who doesn't want to see that? Apparently, it was really common in the 14th century, apparently. And I love that. But there's like legends of like one of our sort of great philosophers, Michael Scott, was believed to come from, or believed to be buried at Melrose. And he did loads of really valuable work translating a lot of medical texts from Arabic into English. Or it might be in Latin actually, but yeah, it would be in Latin. He was believed to be buried at Melrose, so obviously I went looking for him because he was supposed to have been buried with his book of spells, and I thought, oh, that would be really
Oh,
cool. But yeah, and then there was Thomas the
That,
Rhymer, the
that
guy
was not
who
me. Sorry.
um the Thomas the Rhymer, the 13th century guy who was taken into fairyland by the Queen of the Fairies, and then when she let him go, he had the gift of prophecy, and everything that he said came true. There's a stone on the site of the tree where he's believed to have been sitting under to have actually met her. So I went to go and have a look, and it's on Google Maps. So this is the level that this legend has reached. It is a thing on Google Maps.
That's amazing.
And I think that by going looking for these things, um, again, it just takes you off your phone for a little bit. It puts you back into that sense of place. And because a lot of these stories do have like a magical sort of twist to them, and they're no different from people going on ghost walks in a way, you're trying to experience a bit of that atmosphere in that place. So I think that folklore and storytelling in general fits into that kind of enchanted life because you're going looking for these little pockets of magic.
yeah. I
Even if you don't believe in them and you're just wanting to see where it happened, you're still where it happened.
Well, I'm a
I
bit
think
curious about
yeah.
that. Like, if when you go to a place like that and you say, go to that rock that's under the tree, like, is a little bit of you just kind of hoping you'll just meet the fairy? Yeah,
Oh,
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
yeah.
didn't. And of course, I said this on Instagram. And a couple of people were like, well, maybe you needed to fall asleep there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sleeping in public. Like, that's not happening. So that might be the reason why I don't get to go to Fairyland. Who knows?
Yeah, it's more male privilege. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Folklore tripping sounds right up our street, though. That sounds amazing.
Yes.
But you did briefly mention there was like ethics involved with that as well. Just to go back a little bit, you said that you don't ghost hunt anymore because of the ethics associated. What came up ethically for you that stopped you from continuing the ghost hunt?
The problem with public ghost hunts is obviously if you were doing them with a group of trusted people and you all knew what everyone was doing and everyone was there for the right reasons, that's a different ball game, I think. Whereas when you're on a public ghost hunt, you've no idea who you're on a hunt with. So sometimes you can be on hunts where everything's a message for that one person, and again, main character syndrome becomes quite problematic. Sometimes the guides of ghost hunts, I'm trying to think how to put it nicely, but they can treat the dead like performing monkeys.
Right.
And I've been on
Okay.
ghost hunts, and these are all over the place as well. So it's not just one company that does this, but there can sometimes be a tendency where they're trying to like goad the dead into doing something just so that there's some activity for the people who are sitting there in a dark room wondering why nothing's happening. And again, I just sort of think I would be really annoyed if someone came into my place of work and started yelling instructions at us.
Mhm.
I'd be like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not doing that on purpose now, just to wind you up. And I always think that's a bit unethical. And the other thing as well is like when you're then connecting with, or supposedly connecting with the spirits of people who potentially had something really awful happen to them. And we're then asking them questions, but then the next group's going to ask them questions, and the next group, we're just potentially re-traumatizing
Mm.
the dead by
Yeah.
continually making them relive that thing for our entertainment. And I'm like, I don't know
Mm.
how necessary that is. So that kind of thing put me off a little bit. Whereas I think if you're just looking for evidence of activity, that's one thing.
Mm.
Um, but I think, yeah, sometimes it can sort of tip over into exploitation, quite frankly. And people think, oh, well, they're the dead or they're not real. And you think, but let's operate on the proviso that they are real. And, they're going to be hanging around but holding a grudge against you for a really long time. Is
Yeah.
that really a good idea?
Worse
So yeah,
than
that
Australian
that's the
magpies.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the ethical bit that kind of bothers me a bit. It's kind of almost like the ghoulishness that you get with people who go to see like the sites of accidents and things, and it's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
not
There is an
Off-putting.
ickiness to it for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I love the idea. I mean, I've had some paranormal experiences. I'm a bit
Hmm.
like you in that I am very, very tethered to what is real and what I can kind of research and find out. And I'm not as whimsical as someone who co-hosts a podcast called Are We Witches might seem on face value. but um but I'm very interested in it. There's this natural desire to kind of understand, I suppose, what happens next. It's a
Mm.
very human thing to try to find an answer to that. But I absolutely agree that sometimes I'll watch like a ghost hunting show or something, and it is that like, oh, you're just taking this awful way that somebody left this life
Mm.
and just putting it there on a screen for people to see, or you're just picking and picking and picking, and when they're like yelling and trying to get like an EVP or something, which is an electronic voice phenomenon, sorry, by the way, but I just, yeah, it's a problem. I think you see it not only with ghost hunting, but with kind of this, true crime craze and all of that stuff. You can kind of re-victimization and the focus on the wrong things. So I think we feel quite similarly with that. Um, we are kind of nearing the time where we need to move on to our next little segment, but one thing that we always like to ask is, are we witches?
I mean, that's such a big question. I suppose it depends on your definition of witch, doesn't it? Um,
Hmm.
and I think there's been a tendency in recent times for witchcraft to almost get sanitized to the point where it's just self-care. Um, but I think if you're someone who uh is open to the existence of another world, um, sentient beings within it who have their own things that they've got to do, that aren't just there as like a vending machine, like I put a prayer in and you give me what I want. Um, then I think you're definitely in the witchy sphere. This is as
Yeah.
diplomatic as I can be.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
I mean, I quite like occult inclined. Like,
I
I may
do
just be
like
leaning into that. Occult inclined.
Which is funny
Sort of.
because I feel like I am, I hear the word occult and I go, ooh, like get a bit
Mm.
scaredy weedy, but like, but I also head out into the forest at every opportunity and commune with the trees and
Hmm.
definitely want to meet a fairy. And kind of
Hmm.
I feel the life around me that maybe I can't necessarily see. So,
Mm.
But occult seems quite scary to me.
But it just
It's
means
another
hidden.
loaded
It just
word.
means which one?
Hidden. It's like
Hidden.
hidden or secret is what it
Hidden.
originally meant, and then it's taken on a lot
Oh,
of connotations. So yes, it is a very loaded word.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going
Well,
to unload that word in my own mind
yeah.
because actually, I think that's maybe what I am. Is it if that's all it means, then yes, I am occult inclined as well. So good.
Nice.
We'll take
Oh,
it.
before we go on to our last segment of the day, Icy, can you let our listeners know where they can find you, where they can find your amazing work, all of it, the podcast, the blogs, the books, everything? Tell us a little. How can people find out more about all of these stories and things?
The easiest place I recommend is icysedgwick.com, mostly because there's a search bar right at the bottom in the footer. So if there's something particular that, because I mean, there's, yeah, 10 years worth of posts, 10 years worth of weekly posts, I should add, on there. So it
Wow.
might be easier to use the search bar if there's something specific you're looking for. And obviously, my books and all that jazz, and all the web articles have the podcast player directly in it. So if someone would rather listen than read, they can. Fabulous Folklore with Icy is my podcast, and that's like literally, I think, on every platform, including YouTube if you like captions, um and yeah, so obviously you'll find links to everything. I think mostly from my website, and then my social media links are on there as well. Although they're also on my website. I am on X-ish. Like I have a profile. The ones where I'm most active are Instagram and Blue Sky. I don't use TikTok, I will admit that much. It seems like I'm too old for that.
Yeah, we made a TikTok account and have not posted once. Yeah,
I
it's
grabbed
Yeah.
the username and that was it.
exactly that's exactly what we did. Yeah, yeah, we can't seem to get onto there.
We will, of course, link to your website and anything else that we can to help people to find more of your work. But just to finish things off for today, we're going to go over to Magic for the Masses.
Magic for the masses. Magic for the
Yeah,
masses, of course, is of course is
of
our
course.
segment where we look at what we've been talking about for the week and we try to give our listeners something to try, practice, think about to do with the week's topic. Now, of course, this week's topic is you, Icy Sedgwick, and your
Yeah.
work in folklore. Um, what can you think of that our listeners might want to engage with or try this week?
Well, I think a really easy thing that I personally do is whenever, this could sound silly, but whenever I come home, I always say hello to the garden and then hello to the house. Because right throughout folklore, there's a whole load of evidence of engagement with house spirits, less so in Ireland, I must admit, and uh, land spirits as well. And I think that it's a nice way to introduce yourself to them and just acknowledge them. I mean, in a lot of the time as well, obviously they do like it if you can sort of like keep your house relatively clean and in good order. It's a nice way to keep them on side, but then they'll sort of protect your house and so on and whatnot for you as well. There are sort of stories in like Sweden and parts of Germany about leaving out an offering for them of milk, or sometimes they're quite like honey or oat cakes are quite popular, but you don't leave them out specifically for them, you just leave them somewhere they'll find them. Because if they think you're trying to pay them, they will just leave. Yeah,
Ooh.
so
That seems like a really tricky line to tread.
yeah, so, people would just kind of leave things in a particular pot. Obviously, well, like your cat wasn't going to get it. You were just kind of like, I should just leave this dish here. I hope that no one finds it, and then walk off. And yeah, and then they will obviously help, as I say, look after your house. There's loads of different types of house spirits, so that's a really basic way of doing it. But I think just at least saying hello, even just to the house, or home, or however you want to call it, is a really simple way to start engaging with them.
Love it.
Beautiful. I love
Yeah,
that. Well, your clean house is absolutely covered there, Lisa.
that's right.
Keeping some very happy house spirits.
Hopefully they're as yeah, finicky and neurotic as me. Icy, thank you so very much for joining us. It's been eye-opening. I've written so many things down to look up. And I'm sure that you've provided us with so much fodder, and that our listeners are going to absolutely love this conversation and love your work. So listeners, please find everything that you can that Icy's done and engage with it, because it's so good. We are listeners of your podcast and we really enjoy it. So congratulations on everything that you've done. Your latest book is Fate or Fortune, so everybody order that as soon as you can. Where's that available?
Oh, I think that one's mostly on Amazon, or you could get it from the Crosscrow website, whichever one works better for whichever territory you're in.
Excellent. Yeah. So everybody get into it, and hopefully this won't be the last time our paths cross. And yeah, all the best to you with everything.
Thank you very much. It's been loads of fun chatting.
Yeah, you've definitely sold at least a couple more books here. Like,
Exactly.
I'm desperate to find out more about these mancies and divination techniques. So that order's coming right through.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, Icy.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheerio.
If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, and share. It really does help.
This episode of Are We Witches was produced by Sarah Drummond and Lisa Marmer, edited by Lisa Marmer. Follow us on Instagram at Are We Witches and email us at arewewitches@gmail.com.